and welcome to two-way tables. So the idea here is if we want to present uh, the relationship between two categorical variables, then a frequency table like we saw before won't let us see both variables at once. So we want to summarize the relationship between two categorical variables. So this is sort of the categorical equivalent of the scatter plot. So for an example, a study was run on the relationship between work status and student status in Peralta. Work status responses could be full-time or FT, part-time, PT, or doesn't work, DW. Student status responses could be full-time, FT, or part-time, PT. And the following paired data was recorded. So the first students that they worked full-time were part-time students, then part-time work, part-time student, part-time work, full-time student, etc. So we're going to make a two-way table to represent the data. So on one side, we will do work status. Across the top, I will do student status. For work, they worked full-time, part-time, they don't work, and then we'll put it all together and have a total. For student, they were full-time students, part-time students, or total. So going through, student number one worked full-time, so we're in the first row, and we're a part-time student. So student number one would go in the category full-time work, part-time student. That's student number one. Student number two is part-time work and part-time student, so they'd go here. Then we have part-time work and full-time student, so that would be here. Don't work full-time student would be there. Work full-time and full-time student. Don't work and part-time student. Don't work and full-time student. Part-time and part-time. Part-time and full-time. Don't work and full-time. Full-time and part-time. Full-time and part-time. Part-time and full-time. Another full-time and part-time. And then don't work and full-time. So this is just tallying up. Now let's go ahead and replace those with a number. So for full-time and full-time, we just have 1. For full-time and part-time, we had 4. Part-time, full-time, there were 3. Part-time and part-time, we have 2. Don't work and full-time, we have 4. don't work and part-time, we have 1. Now I'm going to get rid of those tick marks. So now we can do the row and column totals. In the full-time work row, there's 1 that was a full-time student and 4 part-time students. In total, there were 5 students that worked full-time. Then we had 5 students that worked part-time. 3 plus 2 is 5. And we had 5 students that didn't work. 4 plus 1 is 5. Looking at full-time students, that first column, we had 1 full-time worker, 3 part-time workers, and 4 didn't work at all. If we add those up, we have 8 students that were full-time students. Then we have 1 part-time student who worked full-time, 2 that worked part-time, and 1 that didn't work at all. Add those up for a total of 7. And then 8 students plus 7 students from that bottom row is 15, or from that total column, 5 plus 5 plus 5 also gives us 15. So this is how we can create a two-way table based off of the data. And then we have a few questions to answer. First up, what percent were full-time students? So we find our verb. After the verb is our numerator. We have our what percent. I didn't say of students, but it presumably would be what percent of the students in the study. So since I didn't specify, it's just out of everybody. So that's our denominator. So out of the full-time students, I didn't specify their work status, so we were just looking at full-time students in general. So that's our 8. So we had 8 full-time students out of 15 students in general. So we are looking at 8 divided by 15. Which is about 0.53. Then we convert to percent by multiplying by 100%, and we get about 53%. Now we want to do what percent work part-time. So again, there's a hidden of what percent of the students work part-time. Work is our verb, acting as our verb. We're specifying work part-time. So this is our numerator. We are again looking out of all students. So out of the 15 students, we had 5 that worked part-time. Again, what I'm doing here I'm looking at working part-time, and in total there were 5. 5 out of 15 is 0.33. And if we convert that to percent by multiplying by 100%, we wind up with 33%. And finally, I want to know what percent were full-time students who work part-time. So again, there's a hidden of students. I have my verb. So I am looking just in general at full-time students who work part-time, all in one go. So this is our numerator. So I want full-time students. So I'm looking at full-time students. I also want that they work part-time at the same time. So the only ones who were full-time students and worked part-time is this number 3 part-time workers, full-time students. We are still looking out of the overall total. So we are looking at 3 who work part-time, full-time student, out of the 15 students. This is 0.2 or 0.20. Convert that to percent, we multiply by 100%, and we wind up with 20%. All right, so this is how we go about creating two-way tables and reading two-way tables.